At 4:30 in the morning on September 20th, 1967, Marine Sergeant Carlos Hathcock lay flat in the mud at the edge of a Vietnamese rice paddy, staring at the 500 meters of open grassland. Somewhere on the other side of that field was a North Vietnamese general who had killed over 200 American soldiers. Hathcock had 4 days to crawl across that field, take the shot and crawl back. 3 recon teams had already tried and failed. Every sniper in Vietnam had refused this mission. The military gave Hathcock a 10% chance of survival. What happened next would become the most impossible sniper mission ever recorded. But here's what nobody expected. The crawl itself would be the easy part. Hathcock was 24 years old. He had 47 confirmed kills. He had survived ambushes, booby traps, and counter-sniper operations. But he had never attempted anything like this. The target was a high-ranking NVA general, codenamed Hotel 6 by intelligence. This general had been coordinating major attacks in Quang Nam province for 8 months. The CIA had finally located him using radio signals and local informants. He was staying in an old French plantation house that sat on top of a hill, surrounded by completely open terrain. No trees, no cover, just grass and occasional anthills. The North Vietnamese had chosen this location for exactly one reason. It was impossible to approach without being seen. The Marines had already tried. 3 different reconnaissance teams attempted to get close enough for surveillance. All 3 were spotted before they reached 800 meters. They took heavy fire and had to retreat. An airstrike was considered, but the general had positioned himself near a civilian village. Command would not authorize the strike. Artillery was ruled out for the same reason. That left only one option. Someone would have to walk straight across that open field, get within rifle range, and take the shot. The mission was offered to every sniper team in the 1st Marine Division. Every single team said no. It was a death sentence. Captain Edward Land ran the Marine sniper program. On September 19th, he called Hathcock into his office. He laid out the mission and told Hathcock he could refuse without consequences. The mission broke every rule in the sniper handbook. No backup team, no extraction plan, no air support, and a target sitting in the middle of enemy territory with perfect visibility in all directions. Hathcock listened carefully. Then he asked 3 questions. How far to the target? What kind of security? When does he need to be dead? Land gave him the answers. 500 meters of open ground, estimated 40 to 60 NVA soldiers at the location, regular patrols in the area, and the general was leaving in 4 days. If they missed this window, he would disappear into North Vietnam forever. Hathcock accepted the mission, but he had one non-negotiable condition. He would go alone. Land tried to change his mind. Every sniper worked with a spotter. 2 sets of eyes, 2 rifles, better odds. Hathcock refused. A second man meant twice the movement, twice the noise, twice the chance of being spotted. For this mission, he needed to be invisible, and you cannot be invisible when you are moving with another person. Land finally agreed. Hathcock would go solo. It would be the first and only time a Marine sniper would attempt a deep reconnaissance assassination. Without a partner, Hathcock spent September 19th preparing. He stripped down his rifle, a Winchester model, 70 and 30-06 caliber with an 8-power unilateral scope. He cleaned every component. He checked the scope mounts. He test-fired 20 rounds to confirm 0. Then he packed his gear. No backpack, no unnecessary equipment. He carried his rifle, 10 rounds of ammunition, 1 canteen, 6 cans of rations, a knife and a compass. Total weight 18 pounds. He dressed in standard Marine jungle utilities, but he made modifications. He removed every piece of metal that could reflect light or make noise. Dog tags, belt buckle, zippers. He taped down everything that could rattle. He painted his rifle stock and scope with mud to eliminate any shine. At 4:15 on the morning of September 20th, a Marine truck dropped Hathcock at a checkpoint 6 kilometers south of the target area. He walked the remaining distance to the rice paddy through thick jungle. Arriving at the edge of the open field just before dawn, he went prone in the mud and studied the terrain through his scope. The grass was dense, about waist-high if you were standing. But Hathcock would not be standing. He would be crawling on his stomach, which meant the grass would barely cover him. Any movement during daylight would create a visible disturbance that enemy observers could spot from hundreds of meters away. Hathcock had already decided on his strategy. He would move only during specific times: early morning, late afternoon, and night. During the middle of the day, when the sun was high and visibility was perfect, he would remain completely motionless. He calculated that he could move approximately 100 to 150 meters per day if conditions were favorable. That meant the crawl across the field would take 3 full days. The shot would happen on day 4. Then he would have to crawl back, which would take another 3 days. 7 days total. He had packed enough food and water for 9 days in case of delays. At 5:20 a.m. Hathcock began to move. He did not crawl the way most people imagine crawling. He moved in a technique called the sniper's crawl, a method designed for maximum concealment and minimum disturbance. He kept his body completely flat against the ground. He moved his right arm forward 6 inches, then his left leg forward 6 inches, then his left arm, then his right leg. Each movement took approximately 30 seconds. He paused between movements to watch for reactions, to listen for sounds, to check for any indication that he had been spotted. At this pace, he covered roughly 15 meters per hour. The first challenge came at 6:40 a.m. Hathcock heard voices. He froze mid-movement, his right arm extended, his left leg bent. Through the grass ahead of him, he saw 3 NVA soldiers walking along a trail 40 meters to his left. They were talking casually, rifles slung over their shoulders, moving north toward the plantation house. Hathcock did not move. He did not breathe deeply. He watched them through the grass until they disappeared from view. That took 4 minutes. Then he waited another 10 minutes before resuming movement. By 9 a.m., Hathcock had traveled approximately 60 meters from the tree line. The sun was climbing higher. Visibility was increasing. He found a slight depression in the ground, a shallow dip probably created by rainwater erosion. He positioned himself in that depression and stopped moving. He would stay there until late afternoon. For the next 7 hours, Hathcock remained absolutely motionless. He did not shift his weight. He did not scratch an itch. He did not adjust his rifle. This is where most people would fail. The human body is not designed to remain in a fixed position for hours. Muscles cramp, joints ache, the mind wanders. But Hathcock had trained for this. He controlled his breathing. He focused his mind. He became part of the ground. The heat was intense. Vietnam in September is brutal. Temperatures reached 35 degrees Celsius by midday. The sun beat down directly on Hathcock's back. He could feel sweat pooling under his uniform, but he did not move to wipe it away. Insects discovered him around 10:30 a.m. First came the ants, then mosquitoes, then small flies. They crawled over his face, his neck, his hands. They bit him repeatedly. Hathcock did not react. Slapping at an insect could create movement visible from hundreds of meters away. He let them crawl. He let them bite. He endured. At 1:15 p.m., something unexpected happened. Hathcock heard footsteps approaching from behind him, from the direction he had come. Someone was walking through the grass. He could not turn his head to look. He could not reach for his rifle. Any sudden movement would give away his position. The footsteps came closer. Then he felt it. A boot pressed down on his right hand. Someone had stepped on him. An NVA soldier was walking through the field and had stepped directly on Hathcock's outstretched hand. The pressure was significant, painful. Hathcock's hand was pressed into the dirt under the full weight of a grown man. Hathcock did not move. He did not make a sound. He felt the bones in his hand compress under the boot. The soldier paused. Hathcock's mind raced. Had the soldier felt something? Did he realize he was standing on a human hand? 3 seconds passed. 5 seconds. The boot lifted. The soldier took another step forward and continued walking. Hathcock listened as the footsteps moved away, growing fainter. The soldier had not realized what he had stepped on. When the footsteps finally faded completely, Hathcock slowly flexed his fingers. Nothing broken, just bruised tissue and compressed nerves. He had been unbelievably lucky. At 4:30 p.m. the sun began to drop lower in the sky. Shadows lengthened. Visibility decreased slightly. Hathcock resumed movement. He crawled another 40 meters before darkness fell completely. By the end of day 1, he had covered approximately 100 meters. He had 400 meters remaining. He was on schedule, but barely. That night, Hathcock moved faster. Darkness provided better concealment, but it also brought new dangers. He could not see obstacles clearly. Twice he nearly crawled into thick thorn, bushes that would have torn his uniform and skin. He navigated by compass and by memory, visualizing the terrain he had studied through his scope during daylight. At 11:45 p.m. he heard voices again. This time they were much closer, perhaps 20 meters ahead. Hathcock froze and listened. It was a patrol, 4 or 5 men, speaking Vietnamese in low tones. They were moving slowly, searching the area. Hathcock pressed himself even flatter against the ground. The patrol passed within 15 meters of his position. One soldier stopped and lit a cigarette. The flame from the lighter illuminated the grass around him. Hathcock could see the man's face clearly. The soldier stood there smoking for 3 minutes, looking out across the dark field. Then he flicked the cigarette away and continued walking. Hathcock waited 20 minutes after they passed before moving again. The plantation house was much clearer now. Through his scope, Hathcock could see details. Windows, doors, a porch on the 2nd floor. He saw soldiers moving in and out of the building. He saw an antenna on the roof, confirming this was a command post with radio communications. Most importantly, at 11 a.m. on day 3, he saw his target. A North Vietnamese officer emerged from the front door and stood on the porch. He wore a different uniform than the others, higher quality, with rank insignia. He stood on the porch for 6 minutes, speaking with other officers, then went back inside. Hathcock had visual confirmation. Hotel 6 was in the building. Day 3 continued. More crawling, more insects, more patrols passing nearby. At 2:45 p.m., Hathcock watched a patrol walk directly toward his position. There were 5 soldiers moving in a spread formation, searching the grass. They were conducting a deliberate sweep of the field. Hathcock realized they might be responding to a report. Perhaps someone had seen something. Perhaps the soldier who stepped on his hand had mentioned feeling something strange. The patrol came within 10 meters of Hathcock's position. One soldier stopped and stared directly at the spot where Hathcock lay. The soldier raised his rifle and scanned the area through his sights. Hathcock remained frozen. The soldier looked for 30 seconds, then shook his head and continued walking. They had not seen him. By the end of day 3, Hathcock had covered a total of 620 meters. He was approaching the halfway point, but he was also reaching the limit of his endurance. 3 days without real sleep. 3 days of intense physical and mental strain. 3 days of constant danger. His body was shutting down. He forced himself to eat another can of rations. He drank the last of his water. From this point forward, he would have no water until he completed the mission and returned to the tree line. Dehydration would become a serious problem. Day 4 began at 4 a.m. This was the day. Hathcock needed to reach a firing position, wait for the target to appear, make the shot and begin his extraction. He crawled for 4 hours straight, covering 280 meters. By 8 a.m., he was 900 meters from the tree line, 600 meters from the plantation house. This was his shooting position. Hathcock found a small anthill and positioned himself behind it. The anthill provided minimal cover, but enough to stabilize his rifle. He set up his rifle carefully, extending the bipod legs, adjusting the scope, checking the wind. The wind was light, blowing from east to west at approximately 5 kilometers per hour. He would need to adjust his aim slightly to compensate. Now came the hardest part, waiting. Hathcock had no way of knowing when the general would appear. It could be minutes, it could be hours, it could be never. He settled in behind his rifle and watched the plantation house through his scope. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. The heat became unbearable. Hathcock's lips were cracked from dehydration. His throat was dry. His vision occasionally blurred, but he maintained focus on the house. At 1:30 p.m. the front door opened. The general stepped out onto the porch. He was wearing the same uniform Hathcock had seen the day before. He stood at the porch railing and looked out across the field. He was holding something, binoculars. The general raised the binoculars to his eyes and began scanning the landscape. He was looking directly at the area where Hathcock lay hidden. For a moment, Hathcock wondered if the general could see him. 600 meters away, prone behind an anthill covered in mud and grass. The general continued scanning. Then he lowered the binoculars and lit a cigarette. Hathcock controlled his breathing. He placed his finger on the trigger. The general stood on the porch, smoking, watching the field. Hathcock had a clear shot. He adjusted his scope for distance, 600 meters. He adjusted for wind, 2 clicks right. He placed the crosshairs on the general's chest. He began to apply pressure to the trigger. Then the general moved. He turned and walked toward the door. Hathcock lifted his finger off the trigger. The general was going back inside. If Hathcock did not take the shot now, he might not get another chance. The general paused at the door. He turned back toward the field and took one last drag from his cigarette. Hathcock placed the crosshairs on target. He controlled his breathing. He squeezed the trigger. The rifle fired. The sound cracked across the open field. 600 meters away, the general jerked backward and fell. Hathcock worked the bolt, ejecting the spent cartridge and chambering another round. He kept his scope on the porch. Soldiers rushed out of the building. They surrounded the general's body. Chaos erupted. Men were shouting, pointing in different directions. Some ran toward the field. Others ran for cover. Hathcock did not wait to observe the results. He knew the shot had hit. He began crawling backward, away from the anthill. Within 30 seconds, bullets started hitting the area where he had been positioned. The NVA soldiers were firing blindly into the field, trying to suppress the shooter. Hathcock crawled as fast as he could while remaining low. He covered 50 meters in the first 10 minutes. Then he heard something that made his blood run cold. Dogs barking. The NVA was bringing in tracking dogs. Hathcock changed his strategy. He could not outrun dogs. They would track his scent across the field and lead soldiers directly to him. He needed a different approach. He remembered the rain from day 3. The ground was still damp in some areas. Water disrupts scent trails. Hathcock began moving toward a low area where rainwater had pooled. He reached the pool, a muddy depression about 2 meters across, and crawled directly through it, submerging himself completely. He covered his entire body in the muddy water, then crawled out the other side and continued moving. The barking grew louder. The dogs were getting closer. Hathcock could hear soldiers shouting, urging the dogs forward. He crawled another 100 meters, then heard the dogs stop. The barking became confused, erratic. The dogs had lost the scent at the water pool. Hathcock heard frustrated shouting from the handlers. He kept crawling. By nightfall, he had put 400 meters between himself and the plantation house. He was 500 meters from the tree line. He could make it. Day 5 was the escape. Hathcock crawled throughout the night, moving faster than he had during the approach. Adrenaline pushed him forward. By dawn, he had covered another 300 meters. He was 200 meters from the tree line. He could see the jungle ahead of him. At 7:20 a.m., he crawled into the cover of the trees. He had made it. 4 days across open terrain, 1 impossible shot, and a successful extraction. Hathcock collapsed in the jungle and allowed himself to close his eyes for the first time in 4 days. 3 hours later, a Marine patrol found him and carried him back to base. He was severely dehydrated, covered in insect bites, and had lost 14 pounds. Medical staff treated him for heat exhaustion and minor infections. Captain Land visited him in the field hospital. Intelligence had confirmed the kill. Hotel 6 was dead. The mission was complete. Hathcock had accomplished what every other sniper in Vietnam said was impossible. The 3-day crawl would become legend. It would be taught at sniper schools. It would be written about in military journals. It would become the standard by which all other sniper missions were measured. And Carlos Hathcock would go on to complete 92 more confirmed kills before a landmine ended his combat career in 1969. But of all his missions, of all his confirmed kills, of all the impossible shots and dangerous operations, Hathcock himself would always say that the 4-day crawl